Hello listeners, Happy New Year and welcome back to Sinister Obsessions. Thank you for being patient with me whilst I had my 2-week break. I am here and I am your host Hannah and I'm ready to get spooky with you in 2024. And I am bringing you a fun episode today, as promised, about abandoned theme parks across Asia. Some may be haunted, some I really need to visit still. What brings so much fascination to abandoned theme parks? Why are they so mysterious? What is it that causes them to be abandoned? If you listen to my Changi Hospital episode, you know that I mentioned getting stuck in a water slide when I was in Penang in Malaysia last year. I do feel like since then I have been thinking about theme parks and water parks, of course, especially abandoned ones. So, before we begin, don't forget to find Sinister Obsessions on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Give a little rating, download, follow. I hate to ask, guys, but it's the drill. Appreciate you all. So I feel like I have mentioned an abandoned school that I visited once in Hong Kong called Tak Tak, which had some awful horror stories. Google it, Tak Tak or Tuk Tuk, something like that. Abandoned school in Hong Kong, a primary school. In previous episodes, I think I mentioned that, and that is spooky and has a really dark history. But did I ever mention that I also went to this abandoned village way up in Plover Cove Park, which is quite close to the border of Shenzhen? It is quite a trek to go up there if you're in Hong Kong City, but it is so worth it. It's a very long hike, and there are some beautiful scenes along the way, and a really cool forest. And once we came into this forest, it was still early in the day, but it got very dark very quickly because of the thickness of the trees. And I remember going down some steps, and we knew that we were really close to the village, but all the trees and the branches were blocking our view for everything. Suddenly, around the corner, popped out a really eerie abandoned house that was completely entwined by vines and dark, horrible windows. There was a spooky abandoned trike. You could really see that this village had been lived in once upon a time and just completely abandoned, as if there was some sort of like radiation exposure and everyone had to evacuate. But yeah, it's called the Sha Tao Kok Village, and like I expressed, there are old banyan trees that grow their roots through the ruins of the houses that do give it the eerie and creepy look. It used to be the houses of the Wans that used to thrive in the village, and the Wans came to Hong Kong in 1671. They founded the Young Shui O village as well, and the village experienced many ups and downs. So the villagers abandoned the village altogether during World War II, as it was also heavily fortified by the Japanese Imperial Army during the war. This was also one of the stories about the little abandoned school. There was a dark story about what happened when the Japanese invaded as well. Also, the area out there in the abandoned village in Hong Kong is super rural, so it is really hard to access and restricted, and it was like that during the colonial times. So just a little bit more back history for you guys on this village in case you do want to visit it one day. You can also access it by ferry, and that's how the villagers would access it. But it became such an inconvenience to them that really the reason why they abandoned the village was just so they could move further into mainland Hong Kong when the city started to develop much more. So unfortunately, no real crazy story there, but I'm sure there are some spooky stories among it. Some of the other things we saw in the village were an abandoned school. A whole set of mahjong was just left on the floor, and even where the person was sitting on a little blanket, there's still a dent from their imprint. And yeah, like I mentioned, the trike, there were cooking pots, toys, broken plates, beds, books. You could go in the houses, walk upstairs, and it really felt like, yeah, the house was still intact, but very, very long abandoned. Anyway, I highly recommend for sure. But like I said, guys, we're not here today to talk about abandoned houses or schools. Maybe another time. We are here to talk about Asia's top abandoned theme parks. So, here we go. People journey from all over the world to explore an abandoned theme park. Some claim they can hear the echoes of fun and the louder silence of decay. Overturned roller coaster carts, dusty arcade consoles, and rusting teacups lie in wait for the next time they will be brought back to life, if ever. Although it is clear to most, these once joyous and exhilarating rides will never, ever be used again. During the 60s and 70s, amusement parks in Asia were a speeding and growing trend, but a series of factors have left many of these parks broke and out of business. As a lot of these closed parks are on privately owned lands or cost a lot of money to demolish, most of them have been left as they are. Forsaken as it is, many curious adrenaline junkies, like myself, that have managed to make their way into parks and capture the current state of the disuse. Most are covered by vastly overgrown greenery and rustling from the elements, but they were all very beautiful and very photogenic, peppered with silence and the creepy essence. We believe that this is the perfect adventure for a brave heart. Extreme rides may be out of the question here, but are you up for a different sort of adrenaline rush? Let's begin in South Korea and journey to a little place called Okpoland. Okpoland was once one of Asia's most famous amusement parks, but in May 1999, it closed overnight, becoming an abandoned eyesore, decaying in the hills overlooking the nearby city. With its uncanny-looking duck carts that sit amongst the spiraling vines on the tracks, there are some dark stories that lie within the park's history. Located on the outskirts of Okpo, on Gyeonggi Island in South Korea, Okpoland was hugely popular with families right up until its closure, in questionable circumstances. It attracted visitors from Asia and beyond, a beneficiary of South Korea's expanding tourism industry following the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul. Because of its proximity to the Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering Shipyard, Okpo has quite an affluent population. Most live in high-rise apartment buildings, and the area has a large expat community. That was to my surprise. I hadn't heard about that before. I am, FYI, looking at potentially maybe moving to Seoul one day, and Okpo hasn't come up, so that's a nice little surprise. Might check that out. Anyway, it had workers coming in from all over the globe. Okpoland was hugely popular among the local population when it first opened. It was an ideal entertainment for those with high levels of disposable income, just like the shipyard employees. Tragedy happened with the little duck-themed ride. It was one of the main attractions in the park, but it was known to cause at least one fatality in early 1990s. A train actually derailed and fell to the ground, killing one and injuring several others. The ride lived on though, and no compensation or apology was ever received for the family, giving rise to rumors about the owner paying off local officials. In 1999 though, the ride claimed its second life. Again, one of the trains derailed and capsized, causing the death of a young girl. Following the incident, the park's owner actually vanished overnight, and Okpoland was closed immediately and indefinitely. Okpoland remained abandoned following its closure, with rides left exactly in the place that they were on the day it closed. And most hauntingly, the capsized duck train from which the child plummeted to her death in 1999 remained hanging over the edge as it had done on that tragic day until the park began to be demolished in 2011. That is, can't think of a deeper word than just so eerie and distressing and visually haunting. Like the fact that somebody died right there and then on that day, and it was just left in the exact same state it was. It's just like a horror movie, knowing and visualizing that it has not even moved since the incident. It's just there for everybody to see it in that way. Anyway, moving on to our next theme park, which is one that I'm sure you've all heard of, Nara Dreamland in Nara, Japan. Opened in 1961, shut down in 2006. This was a park that was created to mimic Disneyland before it came to Japan, and it used to be one of the best theme parks in the 60s. It wasn't up until 1983, when the real Disneyland opened in Tokyo, that Nara Dreamland's popularity started to dwindle as the crowds flocked away. Miraculously though, there were no freak accidents or incidents like the previous park that caused it to shut down, which explained why it lasted so well into the early 2000s. The place is pretty easy to find, and one could easily slip into the now abandoned park. Various explorers have already climbed to the peak of the wooden famous roller coaster, the Asuka. There were very, very stomach-jerking shots from the top of this, and if you Google this theme park, it is definitely the first image that comes up. During its 45 years of operation, Dreamland boasted a handful of wooden and steel roller coasters, a boat ride, a log flume ride, go-karts, a dark ride, a carousel, and a spinning teacup ride similar to the one in Disneyland. At its peak, the park recording attendance of around 1.7 million visitors every year. The park enjoyed a little over 20 years of success with little to no competition. Then, in 1983, everything began to change. With an opening of Tokyo Disneyland, Dreamland began to notice a decline in attendance as more guests began to prefer visiting the official Disneyland theme park. The park was now recording around 1 million visitors per year still, but things would only get worse for the park as time went on. After its abandonment, it had a very still and sad feeling. The ticket booths still stand next to the ride entrances. The carriages sit still on their tracks of the roller coasters. Even the chairs and the coffee machines are still in the restaurants in the exact same place. Paint was peeling off, weeds were growing, rust was forming. But that made everything even more interesting with texture over time. And that is one thing I do want to say about abandoned theme parks, is just the beauty of it. I did actually do a fashion photography degree for my first degree, and I would have killed to do a photo shoot with my model in an abandoned theme park. It's just that incredible contrast of futuristic versus old and nature entwining into each other. It's just got this, real essence of fascination. They're beautiful. I think it's really breathtaking. That's the right word, just breathtaking to see such a huge structure and just different rides. When you think about what people came up with, like spinning teacups, it's such a funny little thing, isn't it? I also thought as well that I would have really enjoyed that if more people were going to Disneyland and Dreamland was empty. Isn't that everyone's dream, to go to a theme park and not have to queue up for hours and hours? I feel like the last few moments for Dreamland, as sad as it was because it closed, probably would have been really fun for the people still going that didn't have to line up. So, in 2001, Tokyo Disney Sea and Universal Studios opened up in Japan and took a massive bite out of Dreamland's attendance numbers. After this, Dreamland lost more than half of its attendance, and the park's condition worsened, with many of the rides breaking down or just becoming rusted. Finally, in late August of 2006, the plug was pulled and Nara Dreamland closed for good, leaving behind 45 years of fond memories and laughter. After the park's closure, Dreamland remained in place, entirely abandoned, but for only 10 years. The decade of disuse left the remaining structures to decay and be overtaken by the weeds and foliage. Most of the rides were left intact when the park closed, including the iconic corkscrew roller coaster that became a quick favorite for urban explorers taking in the site of the abandoned park. Unfortunately, the ending for Nara Dreamland remains came in 2016, a decade after the park's closure. After no bids were made for the property in 2014, demolition was the next best option, and the demolishing of the site began in October 2016 and continued into the following year. Finally, the site was cleared of nearly all remnants, including the pastel-coloured buildings lining the main street, the wooden roller coasters, the ride vehicles, and even the picturesque corkscrew roller coaster. The cleared site is supposedly now designated to be used as a housing for the elderly. The loss of the lonely and once beloved park is felt deeply by all the urban explorers and locals, and the theme park enthusiast who had got the chance to visit during its heyday. Now, the abandoned marvel has become another ghost, but forever remembered in the theme park history. Actually, if I was to do an episode on theme parks across the world, I definitely would have talked about the one in Germany, I think, where an old lady actually got stuck at the top of a Ferris wheel because she used to go there in her younger days and she missed it and wanted to relive some of her older memories. She went there at nighttime. She enjoyed the Ferris wheel so much, she sat on it, but the wind carried her around. It moved the Ferris wheel, and she got stuck at the top for God knows how long. I'll have to research that one again. But that's not scary at all. Maybe it's a sign. Interesting. Anyway, on to our next theme park, which is Encore Garden, Taichung, Taiwan. This park opened in the early 80s and shut down in 1999. So, Encore Garden is a now abandoned theme park on the outskirts of Taichung, the third largest city in Taiwan, and it was opened in 1981 and became one of the most popular attractions on the island. Up to 1 million visitors would come annually to the park, and the park built a reputation as a place to visit for a good day out. Its downfall, though, was connected to the destructive Gigi earthquake, which struck the country in September 1999. Known locally as the 921 earthquake, Gigi earthquake killed 2,415 people and left a further 100,000 plus homeless and caused billions of dollars of damage. It was the worst trauma to hit the country since 1935. Central Taiwan, where both Gigi and Taichung are located, was especially affected by the disaster, and many businesses, including Encore Garden, struggling in the aftermath. The park did reopen, but it never returned to its glory days. Many of the attractions, including expensive-to-maintain technical ones, were either damaged or destroyed by the earthquake, and eventually financial issues and dwindling visitors' numbers forced the owners to close Encore Garden. But visitors have described what they see when they enter the now abandoned park. First, they see a large water flume that looked a bit like a bobsleigh track. From there, following the path, is what must have been the gardens. They saw statues. Most of them looked quite eerie as they were covered in all the foliage, and someone who visited the park described very overgrown greenhouses and water features. As they continued along the path in a circular direction, they expressed how they were up quite high now, and all of a sudden they actually heard a screeching noise, which they had no idea where it could be coming from. The loud noise got louder, and it sounded like cars crashing. Their first instinct was to move off the road in case it was a security guard, but nothing came, and as they got further to the sound, they actually realized that they were by a racetrack. Anyhow, then they head downhill, and the next thing they came across was a large amphitheater with huge rustling floodlights and dilapidated wooden seats. Apparently, the evening water curtain movies and dancing fountain shows, which were put on there, were the main draw for many visitors there. There were disco balls on poles, and there was even a Singaporean mini Merlion, and one of the best features were dodgem cars, all in a line and slowly sinking into the mud, and they looked like they were mimicking a group of wallowing hippos. The next theme park we're going to is Mimaland Gombak, Malaysia. This opened in 1971 and shut down in 1994. I do feel as though some Singaporeans have a very adventurous side and definitely have a deeper fascination with the supernatural and the inexplicable. There are a lot of haunted places in Singapore. Haunted beaches, eerie streets. Singapore is yet to have an abandoned or haunted theme park, unfortunately. However, not too far away from Singapore, in Malaysia, hidden in the lush hills of Gombak, only about 25 kilometers away from the city of Kuala Lumpur, is Mimaland, a forgotten relic of the past. So, Mimaland once had a large water park, hotels and chalets, and a life-size dinosaur figure within the vast compound. Its unfortunate end actually began when somebody did drown in the pool, followed by a landslide a year later. After a court battle, the park had to be shut down with immediate effect. Until this day, it has been forsaken and left for nature to take it back, giving the life-size dinosaurs a very sinister air. It is about a 3-kilometer trek to get into the park, and apparently it can get very dark due to the dense foliage. Keen explorers, though, should be cautious, as apparently a wild tiger was said to be spotted lurking around there once upon a time. Mimaland was also Malaysia's first ever theme park, so I feel as though locals must be more disheartened about this one, especially as it probably was a special place once upon a time in Malaysia. Considering it being the first ever theme park there, it definitely brings a lot of joy, memories, and a new experience. And Mimaland is actually short for Malaysia in Miniatureland. The theme park also had a large lake for boating and fishing. Overall, it was more like a resort, I guess, than a theme park. There were 24 motel rooms, 10 chalets, a swimming pool, and a cozy cluster of 4 dorms with 100 beds. In January 1993, a 27-year-old Singaporean tourist was killed in the tragic incident where he drowned in the pool. It was said that the victim had drowned after using the giant water slide. The following year, development in the area actually led to a minor landslide, which damaged the walls of the pool and eventually resulted in muddy water constantly seeping into the pool, forcing the area to close again and closed to the public. It was learnt that the park was temporarily closed so improvements could be done and made for safety for visitors, but unfortunately after those incidents, Mimaland never reopened. Mimaland may be a distant memory to older Malaysians, but it continues to spark eerie tales amongst the younger generations. Despite it being a dilapidated state, the abandoned theme park remains a source of fascination, with whispers of strange encounters echoing through its deserted pathways. Some have speculated the orang-orang bunyan, which apparently is a mystical being from the Malay folk, living on site, and many claim to spot glances of them while they're there. Others claim they see a woman dressed in white lurking around the area as well. What's also more obvious is that the place isn't just abandoned, but vandalism has also taken place there. It definitely gives the park a surrealist and even an apocalyptic look. In 2020, actually, the mysterious aura of the abandoned Mimaland park also served as an inspiration for a horror movie titled Mimaland. Directed by Nevin Hyung, the film stars Fatah Amin as Ariel, a journalist who is investigating the mystery behind an abandoned theme park in Malaysia called none other than Mimaland. Ariel is then joined by his friend Sean and his pregnant girlfriend Elise on the investigation. They soon discover that the park is haunted by spirits of the people who died in the landslide. The group is also stalked by a mysterious figure who is trying to kill them. Anyway, moving on to definitely one of the most famous and well-known abandoned parks is the abandoned water park in Vietnam, a very eerie monument to an unrealized dream. So since closing the doors in 2006, just 2 years after unveiling, the park had fallen into a state of disrepair, and the exact reason for the closure actually remains shrouded in mystery. Today, it is a crumbling playground for adventurous backpackers who are impervious to health and safety risks and eerie warnings of supernatural goings on. And forgive me, guys, the pronunciation of this park, I find it a bit tricky, but it's called the Ho Thuy Tien Abandoned Park. I'm sure I said that wrong, so really apologies if I did, but I'm sure you can figure it out. It is the huge abandoned water park in Vietnam with the dragon in the middle of the lake. But yeah, and apparently to try and find this abandoned park, it's not on any maps. It remains a little secret. It's shared through friends or people you meet in hostels or locals who are willing to have you pay them to tell the information. Kind of reminds me a bit of that movie, The Beach, Leo DiCaprio, where obviously the beach was kept a massive secret. There was no map, or there was only one map and one person had it. Somewhere located just 8 kilometers south of the ancient city of Hue. Again, sorry if my pronunciation is wrong there. This giant water park was built by the tourism company in 2004 for a total cost of 70 billion dong, about $30 million, and was tipped to the region's go-to tourist attraction. But it was actually never completed. Ownership was later transferred to the HACO company in 2013, with proposals to rebuild the site as an area for ecotourism, but only for these plans to again stall and never actually reach the full finalizations. Never ever reach the full and finalizations of the park. It remains just completely unknown why the project failed though, and why it continues to remain undeveloped. Built in an area renowned for its Buddhist pagodas and illustrious temples, including the tomb of Khai Din, the 12th emperor of Vietnam, some locals, of course, believe it to be very cursed. So visitors have stated that you can either sneak in through the back of the water park or go in via the security guard at the front entrance, and you can bribe him with money to let you access. It is also stated to be very dangerous, as a lot of the structures are unstable. But as you enter the park from one of the dusty trails, you can easily follow a little cracked path that loops around the lake. It will take you to an abandoned amphitheater where apparently tourists would have watched aquatic shows. Then you go to the Dragon Aquarium, a section within the forest where there are rusting water slides and an algae-covered lazy river ride, and to a series of crumbling villas where tourists would have stayed. The 3-story dragon perched on top of what is meant to be an aquarium in the center of the lake is obviously the most alluring feature. And for the unusual sneaky adventurer visiting the park, a climb to the top of the dragon's mouth and through the rusted stairwell will obviously give the viewers a very good view of the lake and below. Some people have said it literally looks like some kind of nightmare, especially if the weather is really eerie and dreary that day. And apparently it's super dark inside, so you do need a torch. The stairwell then goes into a basement where you can step through the smashed glass to see the empty tanks where sharks and other aquatic animals were once held. That sounds creepy. I'm not sure if I'd want to go down there into an underground aquarium in a lake in an abandoned dragon. with like smashed water tanks. I don't know about that, but it sounds super cool. In the distance, water buffaloes actually graze the fields to provide food for the locals and stand in sharp contrast to the lifeless man-made construct. Other attractions to explore include swimming pools, abandoned villas, a concrete car that actually looks like the Ford Anglia from Harry Potter, and an amphitheatre with a capacity of 2,500 seats, most of which have now caved in. The winding water slides, though, make it extremely inviting to the algae-filled pools. Not. Anyway, no one could dare me to jump in there. It definitely looks like a little home for snakes and crocodiles, or to go up one of the water slides. Some are covered. You get those daredevils that love to crawl through these abandoned water slides. You have no idea what's hiding in there or what kind of holes might be in there. You could fall or cut yourself. Very risky. Like I said, guys, I got stuck in a water slide in a functioning water park. So hell no, going to an abandoned one and trying that out. So covered in graffiti and overgrown, the once inviting but now weary water park is rapidly fading away. The elements might not be around for much longer, so if you want to go visit, you better make it quick. It seems as though walking around the grounds, though, is not hard to imagine what joy and excitement it could have brought, but now it's replaced with an eerie sense of time forgotten. And finally, guys, on our list of abandoned theme parks in Asia, we head to Bali, to Taman Festival. Indonesia's tropical island of Bali is home to its fair share of abandoned sites, but Taman Festival Park is perhaps now one of the most notorious. About 2 decades ago, the Indonesian government began constructing the theme park, designed to become a tourist hotspot in the beachside town of Sana in eastern Bali. Like a little scene from Jurassic Park, the park is home to crumbling buildings, statues wrapped in vines, and the swampy remains of an old crocodile pit. This one cost a whopping $100 million to build. The park featured Bali's biggest swimming pool, an inverted roller coaster, a 3D cinema, and an exciting laser show. However, for ambiguous reasons, the park never opened its doors. There are several theories as to why the place is deserted. The first is that it simply closed due to financial difficulties. The second is that there were disputes over land use. And the third, which is perhaps the most unlikely, is that it was struck by lightning on Friday the 13th of March 1998, causing irreparable damage which insurance companies refused to cover. Regardless of the reason, the park shut down and has been left abandoned ever since. And according to Balinese legend, abandoned sites become occupied by the roaming spirits, and Taman Festival Park is now thought to be one of the most haunted places in Bali, attracting spirits from all over the island. Locals don't dare to enter and have dubbed it a ghost town, which of course makes it a very exciting location for people like you and I, or keen to photograph some mystery. And to be fair, looking at the pictures of this park, it is hauntingly beautiful. It's got very traditional paintings of Balinese women with their stunning eyes and their dress features. It looks like it was, built within very traditional temples. Gives kind of that Cambodian Lara Croft kind of feel. The way that the vines and the trees like intertwine and overgrow into the temples with the paintings, it's very quirky. The park's definitely the most unique I have seen amongst abandoned places for sure. Again, it has that whole like apocalypse look as well. And additionally, there are some really bizarre owl paintings amongst the modern graffiti, the creepy vines again, and there's a huge glass roof, which definitely feels, the very like dinosaur Jurassic Park scene, but also a bit odd. Like there are some skeleton paintings with a cultural twist and very bright colors. Actually also gives me Annihilation vibes if anyone has seen that movie. Enter into the shimmer if you must. Anyway, there are definitely elements of a magical and enduring feature and taste here at this park. I think this place might be on top of my list of places to visit, especially as it's so easy accessible from Singapore. There are wild rumors as well that crocodiles were left behind after the park was deserted and that they were fed chickens by the local farmers. Eventually, the farmers stopped coming and the crocodiles instead resorted to cannibalism. And it's said that one of the remaining crocodiles had been known to eat humans, but has since been removed from the park. So there we have it, guys. Those are some of Asia's top abandoned theme parks and water parks. I could go on all day about other theme parks, especially ones that are not in Asia. But that's all we're going to have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I did actually originally want to research the most like brutal accidents that have happened in theme parks in Asia. But to my surprise, actually, there's not been as many, especially compared to the States. I don't know if you guys have seen or heard about some of these absolutely horrific theme park and especially water park accidents that happen in America. Unfortunately, I don't do American cases. Maybe one day if I do Patreon. But yeah, there are some really serious injuries and accidents there. It should put us off, but I feel like it only gives me more curiosity to know and explore these places, especially abandoned ones. There's just, like I said, that beauty to it, especially they're usually out in the jungle in the middle of nowhere in these places like Malaysia and Taiwan. I just feel like it's incredible if you're on a hike or you're just trekking and then suddenly there's a huge landscape of abandoned roller coasters, dodgems, teacups, houses. Like it's just, yeah, like from a movie, from another planet. Crazy. Anyway, guys, I will see you next week where we are heading to China. So I have not done China yet, apart from Hong Kong. And we are going down a different route of murder. Stay tuned. I will let you guys know next week what the episode will be. In the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'm so glad to be back with you guys for Sinister Obsessions 2024. Bye bye.